she comes back and says, "Oh, there's an Alex Ferguson on the phone asking for you, Alan."
2 league titles, a European Cup, FA Cup, League Cup, 2 Golden Boots, 13 England caps.
The most dramatic night in English football history.
Your start initially at Arsenal was tricky. Can you put into words how that felt?
Well, you start to doubt yourself. I was aware of the media scrutiny. You're thinking, am I good enough to be a professional footballer?
Let's talk about life after football.
One day you're inside that circle of trust, and then the day that the surgeon says you can't play on, you're outside. But if you'd have said to me when I retired I would go on and spend 25 years in the media, I'd have said you must be joking. You just never know in life how things can turn out.
Welcome to the Virtuous Mindset.
Thank
good
you.
to have you.
No, lovely to be here.
Yeah, I know we've gotten to know each other over the last couple of weeks, and I got to say that you are one of the most humble, down-to-earth people that I've come across.
Oh, really?
And it's rare to find.
You've
honestly.
spoken to some dodgy people, obviously.
No, it's really good to have you. I read your book. I read it over the weekend, and it's such an interesting account of the experiences that you've had, both kind of the ups and downs that you've gone through your career. And I know that you're also very vulnerable and sensitive at times, which is a hard thing to do. You don't need a formal introduction because everybody knows who you are. But before we get started, as a sports personality, what does it mean to you to have a virtuous mindset?
I think it was my attitude from day to day, going into training, not just on a match day. I've always been a conscientious sort who just tried to give their best, do the best. Very obedient sort of character. So if the manager tells me to do something, I would never answer back. I'd just do it. To reach a level, I think, to set high standards, I mean, that's something our managers always drilled into us, but personally to set high standards every day, because if you can do that, I've met so many young players that have come and trained with the first team. They're the next up-and-coming bright young thing, but they faded away because they couldn't achieve that consistency. They didn't have that attitude, even sometimes when you're not feeling your best. You get out of bed, you think, oh God, the body doesn't feel like it today, but that's when you really have to grit your teeth and still contribute and give a performance. And I've always tried to do that, to be somebody that can be relied upon by teammates and the managers.
Yeah, well, it's clear that you've really pushed yourself through your career, and that you've, persistency is key. Of course, in anything that you do, you have to keep pushing until you get better at something. But I want to start with life before football, because in your book, you talk very positively about your childhood. Despite having money troubles, you say that you're naturally shy and that you're well behaved, and your mum would often ferry you around for matches, and she would take 2 or 3 buses at a time to show her support, which is always really good. What drew you specifically into the game of football versus all the other alternatives out there?
There probably weren't so many alternatives then as there are now. I mean, there's so many things kids can do, but it was just a natural thing at the time. All my mates, I was 4 or 5 as soon as I could walk about and kick a ball. I had a ball with me. I was always carrying a ball. I had the kit of, I was brought up in Birmingham. I think I had Birmingham City's kit, and I remember having a picture taken in the back garden. But I was always over the park with my mates.
Yeah.
And it was just something that we loved doing. Played cricket in the summer. Played tennis at the tennis courts down at the bottom. So we were always doing some sort of sport, but football was always the thing. Yeah. And of course, the more you do it, the better you become. And I was always one of the better players amongst my friends, but I just loved it. I was out from morning till night in the school holidays, and even when I was at home, I'd be throwing a ball up against a wall and practicing my control and my skills, my touch. Yeah, and it never felt like hard work. It was just something that came naturally. I just loved doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the passion clearly comes across, and you were, like you say, you were passionate from a young age. And then I think your mum and dad always backed you when it came to football.
Yeah,
would you say
they were never like tiger mums and dads. They didn't really push in that way.
Yeah.
They encouraged gently, but they were always there to help. I mean, dad worked long hours. And sometimes he was on call at night even. He was working hard for the family. And mum, in the week, if I started playing for the district, and the county, so sometimes we had to get across the other side of the city, and so she'd take me on buses, three
wow.
buses.
Like you said 2 or 3 in the book.
Yeah. So that was invaluable, and you hear about it all the time about how much help parents have given, and you never forget that.
Yeah.
And they just wanted me to be happy and to do well, and you also hear of parents that have pushed too hard, and then the child rebels a
Goes
little
the
bit
other
and says,
way.
I don't want to do it anymore, that's it. But it was never like that with my mum and dad. Dad loved his football, and my mum just wanted to see me do well. So I had a very, very happy childhood, and I say in the book that maybe that's why I've got the temperament that I have, and people always used to say, you could do with being a bit more nasty and that, and have that, and I probably would have been a better player with that extra 5%, of being that nastiness, but you can't pretend to be something that you're not. That's just how I am, and that's that helped me in my career, I think, in the big moments, that I could concentrate and have a calm temperament, not get too pumped up. That's how it
Well, we'll
was.
definitely talk about your calm temperament, because that certainly is something that has helped you through your career. But you were studying modern languages. You were then playing for Alvechurch, the non-league football club, and you managed to successfully sign with Leicester City, which is fantastic to be able to play professionally. What was so special about you? Why did they pick Alan versus the competition that's out there? And I ask this because less than 1% of footballers actually make it professionally. So what was so special about you?
Well, funnily enough, when I was at school, I knew of teammates, say, for the district or the county that got picked up by professional clubs, and I didn't. So at 16, I didn't, but I always enjoyed my studies, so I wanted to stay on at school, do my A-levels, and then when nobody offered me anything at 18, I went to university, and at that point I thought, maybe I'm not going to be a footballer anymore. As you say, I did modern languages, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this degree at the end of the 4 years? So I think that helped me relax. When I started playing for Alvechurch, I was just doing it for the enjoyment, because I loved it. I learnt a lot there. I was there just a year in non-league football, but I suppose when I did relax, I showed my best football, and scouts would always come to those games, professional scouts, to have a look, see what talent was on offer. And I just got picked by Leicester. All sorts of scouts came. The Manchester United manager at the time, Ron Atkinson, came to have a look, which was a big thing. Alvechurch, it's a village club. It played at a good level in the Southern League, but to have the Manchester United manager come in his Rolls Royce and fur coat, it was a big thing. But he didn't actually stay for the whole game, Ron Atkinson, and we joke about it since. But Leicester were the ones that put up the money, and they just saw something in me. Why didn't they, pick somebody else? Who knows? But I was at a good age. I was 18, and they saw something that could be developed.
Yeah, well, that's definitely very clear that they saw something that could be developed, and this is something that I think is really important, because you talk about in the book where the footballers are born with skill, and I know that your work ethic is something that's really important to you, and we go about this point of nature versus nurture.
Yes.
And I refer to the book of Matthew Said, which is something that you made a reference to it, Bounce, and he says that it's all about practice, and if you put thousands of hours in your formative years, it becomes second nature. There's no such thing as innate talent. And you actually agree with this viewpoint that work ethic and putting the grit and determination, focus, is what gets you through, any goal that you want to achieve?
I think so, yeah.
Why is that?
I mean, down the years, so often we've said, he's a natural goal scorer, or, he's a natural that, he doesn't have to work too hard at it. But these people that have got an ability to put the ball in the net, it doesn't happen by coincidence. They have practiced so hard at it until it becomes second nature. I always used to think that, you're either a natural athlete or you're not. But, as older I've realised that it is down to those hours that you put in. And as I said to you, over the park, all those countless thousands of hours and practice, that developed, honed my technique. I became almost two-footed, and people thought I was left-footed because I used to control the ball with my left foot, but I was actually right-footed. But I used to just practice on both sides, and Yeah, but it's just down to putting in those hours. It's pure and simple.
Yeah. But those hours of practice that you're putting in, not everybody is able to do that and execute that effectively. So where does that side of you come from? Like, are there any earlier experiences, earlier memories that you've had where perhaps you've seen a parent work really, really long hours, really work hard at something that's made you want to strive for the same thing? Or is there something that you can
No,
pinpoint?
I don't think it was that. No, I don't. I didn't know it. I was doing it at the time, probably, that I was.
Right. Wow.
I kind of was putting in all this practice, and who knew if it would take me anywhere. You know, so many kids do put in the practice and it never happens for them. So I was lucky, and when I did get a chance, I took it. But no, it wasn't any example that I'd seen. It just felt natural. It was just something I enjoyed. And, you know, some kids are pushed and maybe they haven't got a passion for a sport, whatever. And you know, as I said, that they take a step back and they don't want to do it. But for me, it certainly wasn't hard work, and I just loved it. I just loved messing about with a ball at your feet and that.
Yeah, I think when you enjoy something, it makes it a lot easier, right?
Definitely,
it makes it 10 times easier. So you were signed to Leicester City, as we know, and you'd moved from Alvechurch going on to Leicester City. You didn't get off to the best start, and you mentioned this in the book because you're adapting to Gordon Milner's style, which is obviously difficult, you know, when you're having to adapt to a new team, be in a new environment. And you also talk about the first day nerves and how that affected you on the day that you were coming in and playing your first match. But on the training ground, you actually scored a hat-trick, which is obviously an amazing achievement, and we'll talk about that later on. How did you maintain such a high level of composure during those high intensity moments? Because that's hard to do.
It is, isn't it? I mean, when you look back, you think, oh, I should have been more nervous maybe, because this is at the start of my career, and if I don't get it right, it's all going to go pear-shaped.
Yeah.
And then you tighten up, and if you don't relax, you know, you're not going to play well. So I don't really know. Looking back, it was just one of those things. I mean, when I first arrived at the club, a manager signed me, a Scottish man called Jock Wallace, and then he left. He went up to a Scottish club, and then of course you're thinking, oh, the manager that signed me has left, so this is bad news for me. But then, as it happened, it was good news for me, because a new manager, Gordon Milner, as you say, came in, who wanted to turn over the playing staff, bring in the players that he wanted, and he released a lot. But I was a new boy on the block, and he brought me into the fold. So that was actually a bit of luck, you know. It looked like a setback at the start, but that was one of those little moments that you look back on and think it's a bit of a sliding doors moment that helped me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've mentioned that you have always taken things in your stride and that you've never got worked up. And like you said, you've had that kind of, I suppose, I want to say laid back, but
No,
sometimes
I am
laid back.
I am.
Which is a really good thing, because I would say that it's, in a way, not being nervous and just taking action and getting on with it is a good thing. It's obviously helped you.
It has, I think. I think my school teachers always said, oh, Alan, parents even, and he always takes everything in his stride, he said to my mum and dad. And I never forget my teammate, David O'Leary. He'd been at the club about 10 years, and he ended up spending about 20 years at Arsenal. And he always said to me, he said, Smudge, that's my nickname, he said, most people's lives are like that. He says, but I always think yours is like that. Which I'd never really thought about it before. But when it comes to the big occasion, I think it does help you take it in your stride and not regard it as such a huge thing. Football to me, I've never cried about football, because it, you know, it is a game. Cry about my family and everything, because that's what's closest to my heart. But for me, you know, you go out there, do your best, and hope you're successful. Then you can come home to your family, and that's how I've always looked upon it. And you can't change your character. You are what you are. You can't try and be something you're not. So that's just how it's been with me.
Wow, the fact that you've been able to keep your composure during those difficult moments is an amazing thing to be able to do. And I know that, you know, if you relate it to the corporate world, it's so difficult for people to remain calm and collected during those difficult moments. And I don't know, do you have any tips or advice for those that are listening and struggle with this type of thing? And I know, I always think to myself, what's the worst that can happen? That's how I always phrase everything, especially when I'm doing something that's out of my comfort zone. I always ask myself, Shivani, what's the worst thing that could ever happen? And it's never that bad.
No. And it's never as important what you're doing as you think it is it? Because you're getting wrapped up in it and you think the world's revolving around you and what's happening. But, you know, I always kind of try and look at myself from up on high, and we're all little ants scurrying about, you know, aimlessly half the time. And it's not that important, really. So just go out there and do your best, and, you know, whatever will be. You won't get it right all the time, but you have to make decisions that you think are right at the time.
Right, it's giving importance to the things that actually matter and not sweating the small stuff.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
makes a difference.
Yeah.
So you spent 5 seasons at Leicester. You scored 84 goals in 217 appearances, which is an amazing performance. To maintain that kind of consistency, it takes a lot. So how did you maintain that level of performance throughout those 5 seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I had spells when I wasn't scoring because to join a professional club like that from non-league, it's a big step up. And the first thing I noticed was the training. You're feeling tired because I was only training twice a week with Alf Church. All of a sudden it's Monday to Friday, so you're having to get used to the physical side of it, but obviously the step up in class as well. So that was something that you gradually get to grips with. But when I joined Leicester, they were in, say, the second tier. So as it's the Championship now, below the Premier League. It was the second division then. And there were periods in that first season where I struggled a little bit. The manager took me out, but I still managed to score my fair share of goals. And what helped me, I built up a good relationship with my strike partner, Gary Lineker.
Yeah.
And that always helps. You know, you're trying to make your way in the game, especially somebody like me, a non-league player stepping up to pro football. And then I'm with somebody that I naturally click with. And so we're not having to think about it too much, and our respective games suit each other. And so we had a good partnership, and that definitely helped me on my way.
Yeah, I read in the book that you've always had a really good relationship with Gary Lineker, even like inside and outside of football, your family's getting along, that type of thing. That always helps, I think, when you get along with the people that you work with, in this case that you're playing with.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, we used to go out, my girlfriend and him and his girlfriend, who soon became his wife, as did mine. We'd go out for meals and everything, and we got on well off the pitch, and we certainly did get on well on the pitch. Sometimes with strike partnerships, any partnerships in football, in sport, you really do have to work at them, but this kind of clicked and it was natural, which helped.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. So things took a turn after that. So you had these 5 amazing seasons, and then, you know, unfortunately, in your final season, Leicester were relegated, which is obviously a difficult thing to go through. What was the reason for your team underperforming? You know, why was there suddenly a dip in performance at that point?
Well, we were always fighting against relegation, so it was never a done deal that we were going to be safe in the top league. Leicester never had much money to spend back then, so we were always fighting against it. And we spent 4 years in the top flight that I was there for, because we got promoted in my first year. But the year we did get relegated, I'd actually already signed for Arsenal, so technically I was an Arsenal player. I'd gone back on loan to Arsenal, to Leicester, to try and help in their relegation fight. So it was a weird day when we got relegated, because I waved goodbye to the Leicester fans, and there was a dinner that night down in London for Arsenal, an end of season dinner, and it was a dinner suit affair. And so I'd taken my dicky bow with me to it was Oxford where we got relegated, and so I was thinking about that once the end of the match came. I was sad for Leicester, sad for my teammates, but by the same token, I was thinking about my new career now. And I think I've got to get down to London to meet my new teammates. Yeah. So I've jumped in the shower, got out, put my dicky bow on, and I've headed out the door and left them all there with their heads on the floor.
Yeah.
So it was a weird one. It was sad.
It's bittersweet in a way, right?
Well, in football, you've got to think about yourself as well. You've got to be a little bit selfish in that respect. I mean, I've always been a team player, but I wanted to do well in my career, and Arsenal was a big step up from Leicester. Going down to London was a big thing as well. And I soon found out that the media scrutiny was so much more. If you hadn't scored for a couple of games, it was all over the backs of the tabloids. So, I was thinking about that and thinking, well, that's a shame. I've got to move on now and think, about my new career with Arsenal.
Absolutely. And you had a lot of opportunities at that time because, of course, your performance with Leicester City was obviously very consistent. You were doing really well. And then you were at a point where just prior to being signed to Arsenal, and you mentioned this again, I keep making references to the book, but it's a really interesting point because your first contract with Arsenal, you say from a money standpoint, the contract was nowhere near good enough. And that you feel that you should have negotiated for a higher, salary in relation to that. Looking back now, what are your thoughts? Do you feel the same way, or?
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, people sometimes say, I don't have any regrets, and I find that hard to believe because there are obviously things looking back that you wish you'd done differently. And I never had a close relationship with an agent, which maybe hindered me financially, and I did some of my negotiations myself, but I've never... I'm not a tough cookie in that direction, and I get a little bit embarrassed about asking for so much money, and so it turned out that I could have got more, I'm sure. I could have got more, but I also could have joined the wrong club. I had talks with Chelsea, funnily enough, before I signed for Arsenal, and I knew I didn't want to join Chelsea. This was before they started winning things.
Why is that? Like, why not?
I just had a feeling. I'd had my heart set on Arsenal. I knew Arsenal were interested, and there was something about Arsenal that appealed to me. And so, without even asking how much they paid, I said, "Oh, thank you for the offer, but no, I don't want to join Chelsea."
Yeah. You had a conversation with Alex Ferguson as well, right?
Yeah. He rang up my home one night in the week when I was sat in the lounge with my mum and dad. The phone, as it was back then, always in the hall, so my mum goes out to answer it, and she comes back and says, "Oh, there's an Alex Ferguson on the phone asking for you, Alan." And I thought she got the name wrong, but he hadn't long been at Manchester United. I think he'd only been there about 8 months or so, and he was starting to build things. And again, I said to him, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ferguson, but I've made up my mind. I want to join Arsenal." He wanted me to leave it to the summer when my contract had run out, whereas I was going to sign for Arsenal a few months before the end of the season, which again financially probably wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Almost definitely wasn't the right thing to do. But on the flip side, I joined a club that was on the cusp of things. And funnily enough, Manchester United, they had to wait 4 or 5 years before they won the league. So my career might have panned out differently. In the search for success, I might not have stayed at Manchester United. You never know. Whereas at Arsenal, we started winning things, and I became a big part of the success there.
Yeah, absolutely. And at Arsenal, you had certainly a number of highs, but you also had, some low moments during that time frame as well. And I want to go into that in a bit more detail. But initially, when you joined Arsenal, you scored a hat-trick on your debut in front of a packed Highbury against Portsmouth, which must have been such an amazing...
Wasn't my debut.
Oh, okay, wasn't
my debut. No, my debut was against Liverpool at Highbury, and we lost.
Oh, okay.
We lost, yeah, and then we went up to, I don't know which order, but we went up to Manchester United and QPR. We played over at QPR, and we didn't win. We lost one and drew one. So the fourth game was at Highbury.
Was a Highbury? Okay.
And I said to you, when I was aware of the media scrutiny, the heightened media scrutiny, that was when I saw back of the Sun was Arsenal are going for so-and-so striker because Alan Smith hasn't settled. This was after 3 games when I hadn't scored a goal, so I thought, oh, wow, it's a bit different here to Leicester.
Yeah.
And then I got a hat-trick against Portsmouth, which came just at the right moment for me, and then I went on and scored a few more that season.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't a brilliant season goals-wise, but it helped me just settle in.
Yeah. Yeah. But scoring a hat-trick would have been an amazing achievement. You must have been so happy about that. And I know that, my fiance and, my boss always say that scoring a hat-trick is rare. It's every footballer's dream. So it must have been amazing. Can you put into words how that felt, scoring a hat-trick?
Yeah, it was a relief to start off with, but also to do it at Highbury in front of the Arsenal fans. really satisfying because they're all thinking, we've paid a lot of money for this centre forward, you know, what are we going to get?
Yeah.
So that was nice that I'd got the hat trick and they could see that I could offer something. So I've gone home that night thinking, yeah, maybe I can be a success here.
Yeah.
There were still hiccups, bumps along the road, but
Yeah.
to do that, yeah, it's we beat them 6-0, I think, 6-1, 6-0. So it was a resounding victory, but yeah, to get that hat trick set me on the way. So it was brilliant.
Yeah, it must have been a real, uplift in terms of confidence levels, right? Because you mentioned that it was tricky. Your start initially at Arsenal was tricky, and
Yeah.
you encountered a goal drought, for example, which was really, really tough. And
Well, you
go
start to
through
doubt
that.
yourself,
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah.
When I went to Leicester, you're thinking, am I good enough to be a professional footballer? Then you go to Arsenal and you think, am I good enough for the step up now? So until you can prove by scoring as a striker by scoring goals, there will be that doubt in your mind. And I've never been one of those people that's just so confident that I can do it. You know, I can be a bit not negative, but not rating myself as much as I should have.
yeah,
Not realising that I'm a good player.
yeah, and that you can do it.
Yeah,
You've got the ability.
thinking, oh yeah, I don't know, am I good enough for this? You know, there's always been that kind of attitude.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people are just, yeah, I'm made for this. You know, I can go out there and show them.
Yeah.
I remember an England coach when we were away in Sweden for the European Championships. I was knocking the ball about and I've volleyed one in the opposite goal from the halfway line, and the coach said, "Oh, you're better than you think you are, Alan. You're actually better than you think you are," and that probably sums it up. You know, that I didn't.
But I think in some ways that's better. It's better to outperform yourself rather than constantly think that you're amazing at something, but then you underperform. So the fact that you demonstrated that you can do it and that you're capable is sometimes a good thing.
Yeah. No,
So-
it can be. Yeah, it can be. And then when you do it, you think, oh wow, that was amazing.
Yeah, no, it is an amazing achievement. I want to talk a little bit about the goal drought because, as you, according to the book and what I've read, you scored 11 goals in 39 games at that point in the first season. And so, what impact did that have? Like from a confidence level standpoint, you touched on it slightly because it was a difficult start when you were at Arsenal. So how did that affect you from a mental and physical standpoint going through that?
Well, I think the manager plays a big part. He's invested a lot of money in me, so he wants to see me do well. For him, as much as anything else, his judgment. So he would talk to you on the training ground, and you'd work on things, practice things, and you just have to keep at it. Obviously, you go home some days and you think, oh, this is hard work. Am I going to be good enough for this? But yeah, I've always been a persistent character, quietly stubborn. I'll just keep going at it. And I never knew I was stubborn until my dad told me once. I never thought I was, and then people since have said it in an affectionate way. Oh, you're stubborn, Alan. My commentator said it once, and I never thought I was. But kind of that quiet resolve to keep on going and to stick to it, get your head down, keep going.
Yeah.
And then if you've got the talent, it'll happen.
Sometimes that's the best way forward, to quietly work on yourself and push forwards sometimes makes all the difference. And like you say, you did get through it, and the following season was a complete contrast. You ended up scoring 23 league goals. You earned your first England cap against Saudi Arabia, and you also earned a golden boot, which was an amazing achievement, of course. There's so many quotes, positive affirmations out there about having to fail to succeed and picking yourself back up. So how did you raise your game that following season? What changed in terms of like a strategy point of view?
Well, I'd got one season under my belt, so I felt a little bit more settled. And, off the pitch as well, you've bought a house and you're getting used to the area. A lot of the fans don't see that off the pitch stuff. So you're feeling a bit more settled at home and getting into a rhythm and a routine, going into training. You know the lads better. I scored a hat-trick on the opening day of that season. You've just mentioned 88, 89 at Wimbledon. So that got me off to a flyer. And I remember the journalists outside the dressing room waiting to talk to me and asking if they thought I'd win, be a contender for the Golden Boot, the top scorer. Oh, no, I'm not that type of player. You know, typical me, because I play more with my back to goal and creating. And I said, don't put your money on me. But yeah, I ended up winning the Golden Boot. But I didn't have too many runs of games where I didn't score then. It was quite consistent.
Yeah.
And I've always been kind of one of those scoring bursts, you know, and I might have a drought here and there, but once I start scoring, like most strikers will tell you, because you're not thinking about it, you're just putting the ball away instinctively. And the team were getting better as well. We were creating more chances. We were becoming a better team. We won the league that year, so obviously we were becoming better. And I was at the focal point of it in attack. So yeah, it was a lovely season to play in.
Yeah, I mean, overall you did really, really well. Of course, you have 2 league titles, a European Cup, a Winners' Cup. I'm going to list it off: FA Cup, League Cup, 2 Golden Boots, 13 England caps. And so, looking back on that performance overall, you know, how do you describe your success at Arsenal? Do you reminisce and think, wow, I'm really grateful for what I achieved? Or do you think...
No, I do, yeah. I do. Well, I mentioned luck earlier, and I joined Arsenal at a time when they were on the cusp of things. There were a raft of youth team players coming through: Tony Adams, David Rocastle, Michael Thomas, Paul Merson, all talented young lads were coming into the first team, and I could see that. And then the manager added players like me and Lee Dixon, Nigel Winterburn, Steve Bold. That formed the basis of the defence. So I was lucky that I joined a club that was coming into a period of... I mean, obviously I contributed to that success, but I say in the book, there's much better players than me haven't won anywhere near the same amount of medals. And that's a bit of luck as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a golden period in Arsenal's history to win all those trophies. So I look back, you know, with great satisfaction that I was able to do that. I really do. Yeah,
you should be proud. You've done an amazing job, and you're still humble in the way you deliver it, which is, you don't find that often, especially when I speak to people day in, day out. It's rare to find people that are humble, and even though you've achieved so many things, you're still looking back and thinking, well, actually there was an element of my hard work and determination, but it's also about luck. And so I can really see the humble, you know, side of you come through.
Well, that's just me. That's just the way I've always been. But I mean, it's a most, say, boys' dream and girls' dream, obviously now more, with women's football becoming bigger.
Yeah.
To be able to have done what I have done, I feel honoured, really, and been involved in some huge matches. I mean, to win the league at Anfield in 1989, which is probably the most famous game in English football history because of the circumstances, to grab the title in the last seconds, and I scored in that game and set up the winner. And so that was so satisfying to be able to contribute when the pressure was really cranked up, you know.
Yeah.
It was that's when a level temperament, I think, helped me.
Yeah.
When I could just concentrate on what I had to do and not think about the occasion, really, just think about what your job was.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. I want to talk about something slightly different, because following your success, having won 2 Golden Boots, I want to talk a little bit about Ian Wright, because you mention him in the book, and this is in line with the topic of confrontation and, you know, being able to address that. And, you know, to bring context, Ian comes in, his style's improvised, it's different to what you're used to, it's unpredictable, and you talk about this in the book, and you say that you wish you had spoken to him privately and had a conversation with him about finding a way to collaborate better on pitch. And you say that confrontation is not something that comes naturally to you. No. Self-doubt's creeping in at this point, even though you've earned 2 Golden Boots. Looking back now, what are your thoughts on confrontation, and how would you deal with it, like, moving forward? Yeah,
I mean, I'm not naturally somebody that wants to face up to a problem. I kind of buried it in a way, but I wished I had addressed it a little bit more And I remember ringing up Ian when I was writing the book and saying, look, I'm going to talk about our relationship. And we'd never spoken about it, but the fact that it didn't click, and I really struggled. He didn't struggle. He was flying. But he said, yeah, that's fine, Smudge, you say what you've got to say. But yeah, when Ian came to the club, I thought it was the best move ever, because his game I thought would really suit mine.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, it didn't. It's funny how things turn out. But yeah, confidence-wise, I'd never been lower. I just couldn't get things together. And as you say, I'd won the Golden Boot the year before Ian came. But then my goals really dried up. And I went to see a sports psychologist.
Yeah, you say that in the book.
And this was when people didn't see them so much. But this particular sports psychologist had come along with England. So I knew him and I went to see him, but it didn't really do much good. And as it turned out, I never actually solved it. My relationship with Ian, we never got it together. And then I got injured and I retired.
Yeah.
I mean, the other big game in my career was when we won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1994. Ian wasn't in the team that night in the final. He was suspended. And it was almost as if the clock was turned back and I became the player that I was before he arrived, and I had more confidence. It was a very weird situation, really.
Yeah.
And it's how your mindset can change.
Yeah.
Somebody's not on the pitch and things feel different.
Yeah.
So that was a big regret that I never solved that, and then I retired and I never kind of came out of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I will ask you this. It's a bit of a harder question at this point, but when you say that your performance was obviously going, I suppose, downhill in relation, following Ian coming in, do you think the way you were treated, perhaps, like, by teammates or from like a managerial standpoint, was that, was that impacted because of your performance, so to speak?
Yeah,
Do you think that you're treated differently?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you're no longer quite so valuable, and people think, oh, he's had his time. We've seen the best of him, and probably
that's
time
hard,
to move
right?
Yeah,
especially when you've been committed for so many years.
Number one striker, there. I was the top scorer for 4 consecutive seasons, and then as I said, it stopped. But it's but it happened. I couldn't sort it out. But again, most footballers would tell you they've had really low points in their careers, and that was mine. But on the flip side, I had to make sure I contributed to the team. So I was still doing a job. I wasn't scoring anywhere near as much, but I was holding the ball up, I was working, I was laying balls off, creating goals, getting assists. Although we didn't, assists weren't mentioned then. But I felt, well, if I'm not going to score, I've got to make sure I work even harder, and I do actually contribute to the team, and I did.
Yeah.
I was in and out then, whereas before I was always first choice. But it wasn't easy to deal with.
No.
Once you've been there, and then you're kind of back in the pack, and
it's tough.
Oh, am I going to play Saturday? Am I not? That kind of. I always knew before that I would play.
Yeah. Well, at least you put 110% in, despite that. So that's always a good thing. So, as you said, you retired due to injury. As you mentioned, you retired at the age of 32. And some of the things that you talk about this right at the beginning of your book, in relation to your injury, you say that you were devastated, you felt like an outsider, and the thing that you missed the most would be the camaraderie, that feeling of togetherness, the unity aspect. At that time in your life, how did you cope through that time frame?
Yeah, not easy. My family helped me enormously. I mean, I've got 2 young daughters, and my wife was there for me. But it's so difficult, because one day you're inside that circle of trust in that dressing room, and then the day that the surgeon says you can't play on, you're outside the circle. And I never forget going to pick up my boots and that from the training ground, and it was the first day of pre-season the following season, and I went in to say bye-bye, and I couldn't wait to get out, because they were all looking ahead and looking forward to the season, so their priorities were much different to mine, and I was just outside, and I wanted to go. But at that point I'm thinking, right, okay, I've got to earn a living, because obviously the money that we earned back then was good, but it wasn't the amount that you could not have to worry about providing for your family. So I can understand why so many players do struggle, and I think they will still struggle.
Yeah.
Not from a financial point of view if they've played at the top level, but what am I going to do with my life now? You know, they've got a long time.
Yeah.
There's a saying in football: you're a long time retired, and so make the most of your career. But this was forced upon me, and that's when my education came to the fore, and I was able to start doing some writing for the Evening Standard. I started doing some columns, and then I started writing for the Telegraph. So I was able to concentrate on something.
Yeah.
And all my ex-teammates were still there. I mean, the first day of the season, and I'm looking at match of the day, whatever, and seeing them all trotting out.
Yeah, that's hard.
Not easy at all.
Yeah.
And I'm sat at home, and they, a lot of those lads went on to play for another 6-7 years. So.
Yeah.
But again, you know, you don't want to wallow in your own self-pity.
Yeah,
I just got my head down and concentrated because I've got a family to support. What am I going to do now? And that's what I did. I just tried to, you know, look forward.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to footballers who have to retire early, either because of injury or for another personal reason? Because, you know, like you said, that the career span of a footballer is very different from, say, someone with a corporate career who's in their job for 50, 60 years. So are there any tips or advice, words of wisdom that you can offer to those that have to retire because of injury, looking back now?
Yeah, well, don't look back, look forward, and try and you've obviously got skills as you've been an elite athlete, so try and transfer those skills. You know, you've had dedication, ability. Try and transfer those into something else. You know, it's not always easy to find a new path, but try and do it, and concentrate on that and being as good as you can at that, rather than always lamenting about my career that I've lost. It's not easy for a lot of lads, but you know, it's the only way forward, really. I mean, the divorce rate for retired footballers, I think, is really high. Yeah, so it's you know, it's quite a worrying thing.
The stat is like 1/3, or is it more than that? I think you made a reference about this in the book. I'm trying to remember
something
it.
like that. Yeah, you can see how it would test a relationship, because all of a sudden you're sat at home, you know, kicking your feet, you haven't got anything to do. But if you just try and find something and devote your energy to that.
Yeah, stay in the present really is what's important, right? Yeah, of course. I want to shift your mindset onto mental health a little bit in relation to the sports industry, because in the book you talk about the fact that footballers take medication and sometimes they do that instead of resting for 2 or 3 weeks, let's say, and they're fearful of being replaced. And for me, when reading that, that's such a ridiculous amount of pressure to go through, you know, to have your career potentially, you know, there's so much uncertainty, for example, and you're always worried that you may get replaced by somebody else. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that that's still prevalent today, or do you feel things are changing now?
I think it's probably slightly different today because of the money, the huge sums of money that players earn. They don't feel as vulnerable now. They've obviously got that security of a 3-4 year contract, and they think, well, I will get back in the team eventually. For us, it was win bonuses were always a big thing. They don't play a part now. They're not as important, but for us, so you want to be in that team. An appearance fee quite often you would get, you didn't want to drop out, and so anti-inflammatory tablets you'd take to numb the pain and try and grit your teeth and carry on. It was a different mindset then, I think, to what it is now.
But at some point that must take a toll on you, right? Because you keep on taking this medication throughout your career, which serves as a small-term fix, and then at a certain point it all gets too much and then you have to retire. So that must be difficult to have to deal with, and it must have a toll surely on from a mental health standpoint.
Yeah, and the medical support back then was nowhere near what it is now, and players used to have cortisone injections into their joints, which you have too many of those and it can damage the bone, and you know, a lot of players have suffered that way. So the lads today are so well looked after, and that would never happen.
That's good.
So they're brought out, and even before they get injured, sometimes they're brought out because they've got the heart monitors on, and the coaches, the sports scientists know when they're getting tired, and when you get tired, you're more susceptible to injuries. So there's all this devotion to it that we didn't have.
Yeah.
You just kept on going for as long as you could.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a bit of mental fortitude to do that,
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to show a weakness in your character if you were struggling for mental health attitude. That was never spoken about then.
Yeah.
Where it is a lot more now, which is
Yeah.
a fantastic thing. It's more out in the open, but then that would have been a sign of weakness.
Yeah, I guess there's more awareness of it, and I think people are reframing their mindset in relation to it. I know there's still stigma attached to mental health in certain communities, and it's still sometimes looked down upon or perceived in a different way, but certainly I think there's more awareness in comparison to, like you say beforehand, where it wasn't talked about.
No,
so.
And the football world, the men's football world, is quite a macho environment. It still is.
Yeah.
And people expect these footballers to be strong and be mentally strong. And you do have to be mentally strong to do well in football. But, nobody's 100%, bulletproof. Everybody can have their low moments. So it's good that people can address those more now.
Yeah.
I remember I played with a lad he got ostracised for about a couple of years. He'd said something in the paper that the manager didn't like, and he was sent to train with the youth team. And this went on for 2 years, which would never happen now because you're earning too much money to be wasted. But, his mental health, goodness knows how he felt for that time when he'd get changed next to me, and then I'd train on one pitch and he'd be over there with the young kids, and he was a senior pro. So
Oh my gosh.
that used to happen a lot back then. You could be bullied by the management, and you had to accept it, really.
Yeah.
So, it was just a part and parcel of the game.
Yeah, but I guess it's changed now. It's not maybe the case anymore. Perhaps. Do you agree?
Well, the players hold all the cards.
Yeah,
now. They do.
That's
they do.
good.
You sign a contract for £20 million over 5 years or something, and you call the shots.
Yeah.
For a manager's got to manage much differently. The manager's got to be a psychologist, really, in how to manage, how to treat different characters, because you they're a little bit more fragile now. They can be upset easier. So there's not so many rantings and rollickings going on, and Alex Ferguson used to have the hairdryer. He's shouting in somebody's face. That doesn't happen really at all these days. It's a lot calmer, and people thinking about, how do I deal with him in a calm and reasonable way, where it wasn't like that in my time.
Yeah. I suppose in a way that experience that you've had has made you stronger and in a way resilient, do you reckon?
Yeah.
Having those tough experiences maybe with managers in the past where they've maybe not necessarily been as empathetic to your situation.
Yeah.
Do you feel in some ways that it's made you a lot more resilient and tougher? And like you say, you've mentioned this idea of not sweating the small stuff. So do you feel in a way that it's benefited you in some ways by having that kind of tough approach?
I think so. To be able to take it and act on it constructively, and not fold and just disappear into the corner and blubber and wreck. You've got to put your chin out and react. And show that you can get better, do what he wants you to do, and take all that, because all your teammates are looking at you when you're getting a rollicking, and they're all looking to see how you react as well. So you're aware of that. You need to respond to it.
I suppose it shapes you in some degree. Let's talk about life after football, because like you said, you've been writing for the Telegraph, you've been commentating for a number of years. What's that transition been like in terms of moving from the world of football, well, as a footballer playing football, to the point of now commentating and writing for the Telegraph?
Well, if you'd have said to me when I retired that year if I would go on and spend 25 years in the media, I'd have said you must be joking, because I am more introverted than extrovert, quieter sort of character, and I thought that's not suited to the media world, really. I thought writing would be, but the TV side of things, I never thought I would make a career in it. So you just never know in life how things can turn out. But I'd got a relationship with Sky, having been a guest there when I was injured, when I was at Arsenal. So then that kind of built up when I was retired, and I acted as a studio guest for the Arsenal games, and I started doing other things for them and kind of learnt on my feet. And the best thing I ever did was get into the co-commentary world. And again, when one of the lead directors asked me, he said, you should have a go at this, and I don't think I'm suited to that.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a bit of a dull, brummy, monotone voice, which I have, but when I commentate, I've learnt to lift it, and so I've always known what I've had to do for things. I've been able to self-teach myself things and work hard at it and know what's required, and I knew in commentary that, you know, you had to give it some welly, and so I gradually got to grips with that, and I've been doing that for like 18, 19 years or something. So that's been wonderful. But yeah, I'd never thought I would have hung around in that industry for so long. Really, I mean, it's amazing, really, how life can turn out.
Yeah, I mean, you say, again, in your book, you say that you underestimated your abilities when it came to commentating, and you lacked that self-belief, and, you know, you thought almost, I can't do this, I'm not capable in a way of perhaps going down this new path. Why do you think you feel that way? Why is that happening?
I don't know. But the good thing is that I could do it.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I mean, I don't want to tempt fate, but everything I've tried to do so far in my life, I've been able to make a success of it. So there's got to come a time that
you've got a proven track record.
Yeah, but that is down partly to dedication, and as I said, that bloody mindedness that I'm going to be able to do it. It's that quiet stubbornness that I'm going to really think about this, what needs to be done, how I can become a success at it. I think some people get into it and think it's just going to happen, and whatever they say, they'll be a success, and they don't work at it enough. You know, I've always worked at it, and I still do. You know, and going onto a gantry to do co-commentary, I'm always feeling I've got to prove myself again. You know, every match I do, because you know, it's a competitive industry. There's loads of people want to do my job, so thankfully it's not an easy job to do. If you're bad at it, it shows straight away. Really? If you're good at it, almost you go under the radar, you're not noticed. But if you're bad at it, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Co-commentary. So thankfully, I've been okay at it. Yeah, well, clearly you have been. My fiance says you've been great at it. Oh, so he's good. A good lad. A man of taste. That's good. One thing I will ask you on in the spirit of commentating is that, do you find it hard to remain neutral when you're covering both sides of an argument, both in your writing but also in the world of commentating, especially if you're talking about a former team? Do you struggle with that? Because in the book you say that some people do struggle with it and they find it quite hard, especially when they've moved away from being a footballer and actively playing to the point of where they're now commentating and they have to talk about and perhaps criticise in some ways. Yeah, and you might be criticising former teammates, friends. Exactly. But I've not found it difficult, I must admit. I've just thought I've got to be fair to both sides. There were people at home, same I'm doing an Arsenal game, that Arsenal versus Aston Villa, you know, there are people at home supporting Aston Villa. I've got to represent them as well as represent the Arsenal fans. So I've always tried to, you know, go down the line and be 50-50. To be fair, Arsenal fans have had a go at me for saying, oh, you'd never thought he'd have played for us, you know, he's anti-Arsenal and all that. But it's not, it's just trying to be fair to both sides and being impartial. I've never found that difficult. I mean, I did upset Arsenal fans a lot, and I upset the club as when I was critical when Arsenal got into a scrap at Old Trafford against Manchester United, and I was up in the Sky studio that day, and I was critical of what happened at the end when there was a scuffle and everything, and I went down and wrote a piece for the Telegraph as well, and I was critical again. At that point, I was writing a column monthly, an interview with an Arsenal player each month, and that stopped because they felt I can't be critical 1 minute and then coming in the next and being all friendly with everybody, and in a way that put a nice distance between. It was a good move journalistically to put a distance between me and my old profession, and so I felt I could be a little bit more subjective and honest about what I was seeing, and I didn't have to worry about upsetting ex-teammates, whatever.
How do you not worry about upsetting
I did
because you're
worry.
you're a public figure,
Yeah,
so
I
that must
did
be
worry,
hard.
but I was determined to try and be fair and to be honest. I've always been quite honest, so I was determined to be honest about what I was seeing out on the pitch.
Yeah.
And it's a game anyway, so if I say he's had a bad game, and players remember the slightest thing, you know. I remember it myself, and some players, after I've retired, and I'll meet them and they'll give me the cold shoulder, and I'll think, oh,
Really?
I've obviously said
Wow.
something, you know, 5 years ago that they didn't quite like, and they remember it.
Yeah.
You know, they do.
Yeah.
But, you know, if that's the way, and it makes me laugh a little bit, because it's not important, is it? But players do take things to heart, and they'll remember. They won't remember all the wonderful things I've said about them. They'll remember that one little comment one day I said 6 years ago.
But that's human nature, right? We're always the ones that are self-critical, right? We always think about the negative aspects rather than what's positive in our lives. It's easy to focus and concentrate on the negativity, and the fact that you're able to block that out in a way, especially, you know, when I think about your career at Leicester City, Arsenal, being a public figure. And that must have been really difficult, dealing with, say, media pressure, having articles written about you, being scrutinised openly, publicly, having people analyse, you know, commentators, you know, analyse all of your games. Yeah. That's hard. So I know that you've, in a way, in some degree, you've answered this, but what advice would you give to others that where they feel that they are constantly being criticised and scrutinised for making a particular decision? How do they block out that white noise and just focus on what they need to do?
If they're sensitive to it, I mean, don't look at social media after you've been on. You'll always get people criticising. I might have a little glance, but I don't take it seriously, really, what people say, because I know I'll be criticised. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a person with thick skin, but I try and just put it in perspective. You know, I've just been commentating on a football match and trying to speak my mind and be honest. And obviously, one half of the viewing public who I've kind of spoken against their team, they're not going to like it. But, you know, fans are so one-eyed and see things down a tunnel that you're never going to please both sets of fans. I mean, if you work in the media, don't try and please everybody. It's never going to work. Just say it as you see it. So, I mean, I know of footballers that even at half-time now, I'll get the phone out of the pocket and have a look what people are saying on Twitter. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
If you're that bothered about what some random stranger thinks about your first half performance, you're in the wrong game. So, yeah, I've always taken it with a pinch of salt, really.
Yeah, no, that's really amazing. I have one final question. What's next for you, Alan? What's next on the horizon?
Well, I don't know, actually. But, I mean, I'd love to commentate for as long as I can, because I really enjoy it. I've written my book. Whether I've got another book in me, I don't know. I wouldn't mind writing another book. I'm not writing for a newspaper at the moment, so it wouldn't be an autobiographical thing, but maybe a bit of fiction. I don't know. But there's always something around the corner.
Yeah.
So you always, you know, you can never predict what's going to happen in the future. As I said, I would never predict it. I'm in this position now, so there might be some surprises. But it's important to take on challenges. I think sometimes that you think, oh, I don't want to do that, but you know, it's important to get out of your comfort zone and do things that you think maybe wouldn't suit you, but in the end, maybe you find out that they do.
Yeah. Well, look, Alan, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for coming on board.
No, it's been my pleasure. Enjoyed it. Thank you.